Hey guys, sorry it's been a while, more than a while. I have been really busy and reprioritizing my life. There's Chicago, so now I'm just really curious. Um, so anyway, yeah, I apologize. I'm not a very good YouTuber. For one, I don't have the equipment. For two, I don't have the time. And for three, Detrans stuff is depressing. Um, Not always, but most of the time you get into this stuff and it gets you down a bit. So I've been sort of refocusing on things that make me a little bit less depressed and a little bit less angry. Um, I apologize it's been so long, but it's just been kind of time and focusing on my mental health and stuff. So, yeah, thanks for tuning in. If you are subscribed, I appreciate it. If you're not, that's cool. I don't post often, so don't have many expectations of this. But I did want to do a follow up on a Twitter post that I did a few weeks ago. So I posted about a preschool that I worked at a number of years ago that was gender non-conforming, but really focusing on gender ideology and promoting that to these preschool age children. And it was really, it was kind of insane. Um, the Sorry, my dog is acting up today. But this preschool that I worked at, it promoted gender ideology to a point where there would be repercussions for children who misgendered each other. I say misgendered. They would correctly sex each other, and they would get called out, and in a really unhealthy, uh, uneducational way. I think so. I wanted to talk about that a little bit. So um, I worked at this preschool um, roughly 4 years ago, um, and I had never worked in preschool before. I had no experience working with children, other than like babysitting and like a couple of stints here and there as like a nanny. But I didn't really have a very good CV for experience with children. So I applied this place on a whim, and I thought like there's no way that they're hiring me. But it still gets to apply to places. I believe that like if you see a job that you are interested in and you feel like you might be good at it, it does help to apply just to learn the ropes a little bit of what they expect of you, and how an interview might go, things like that. It's been kind of difficult to learn how to interview as a woman. I know it's kind of a weird thing to say. Maybe people will disagree with me, but I just feel like women are taught to search for careers any differently than men are, generally speaking. It also depends on the field. But in any case, so I basically applied to this job thinking like I'm not going to get hired. Um, but I got a call back, and I was really surprised. And when I spoke with the owner on the phone, the owner of the preschool, um, she, without me bringing it up, she brought up that they were very trans friendly, and I thought, okay, that's great, I guess, but that doesn't really matter necessarily. Um, my my take on that at the time was always like if a place is trans inclusive, then that means I can be a little bit more open. But generally, I am not super open about my personal life in whatever career I'm working in anyway. So I didn't really feel like it was necessary for me to specifically work in a place that was trans inclusive. I was fine working in a place as long as they were not bigoted in any really appalling apparent way, then it wouldn't be a problem, right? But she like made it a point, like, yeah, we're trans inclusive. We highlight trans people in our business. And I was like, kind of, ambivalent about that. Um, and then later, I had an interview with her, and I said, yeah, I guess it's great that you're trans inclusive. I'm actually trans myself. And she, I mean, um, the owner, she said like, oh, that's great because I'm really only looking to hire trans people. Um, so if you're questioning that at all, um, as to why that might not be a great thing, here's the gist. When you isolate your demographic for who you're willing to hire based on a marginalization or a category that they fit into, that's discrimination, even if it's for a positive outcome in their favor. Um, that's still discrimination in a way, and because you are basically saying that they are somehow more qualified because they are a marginalized group, and that's ridiculous for people. Um, so I was kind of taken aback at that, but I didn't want to question it too much because I thought like this might be my best opportunity to get into this field. I think I would enjoy this field. And at the time too, I didn't have a lot of career options, so I thought like, hey, paycheck, cool. So I got into it. When I got there, it was not what I expected. I guess I expected a bit more of a clean cut, um, organized place. Um, this was fairly disorganized. The place was fairly dirty, and it was kind of in an isolated area. It was in a neighborhood, but it was kind of like away from the highway. And I realized like, okay, this is a privately owned preschool. This isn't like a chain um, place that's regulated the same across the country or across the state or whatever. This is just one place, and they have their own state laws that they abide to, but then they have their own regulations as well that they impart. So that being said, um, I found it very challenging to um, be trained. I didn't really receive training. They basically threw me in and said, "You're the preschool teacher. Teach preschool kids things." And there wasn't really any curriculum to speak of. They didn't offer resources like websites or books. They didn't offer any previous curriculum to look at. It was really just kind of fly by the seat of your pants, figure it out kind of shit. And I don't work well in an environment like that. I work better in an extremely structured environment where I'm told very much in black and white they what they expect of you, performance wise and education wise. And I mean, I can come up with my own curriculum, but I needed resources at that time because I was planning, and that was not provided. What was provided was a statement regarding their inclusivity and diversity, and how they emphasized trans and non-binary identities in school. Um, Thought that was weird. I didn't really understand how they were putting that to play with the children until I saw firsthand, and I sat in on the classroom and watched the teacher, who was a non-binary female person. Female person is kind of tricky to say that. But a non-binary female. I watched her. I'm gonna say her, even though things. I watched her talking with the children, and one of the children pointed out, "Oh, he's wearing a dress," and she just got right on top of it and was like, "No, you don't get to criticize him. Boys can wear dresses, girls can wear dresses, but we're all non-identifying here, so we all get to wear dresses or whatever we want to wear. Um, and it was really bizarre. Um, Basically, that the emphasis was more on anybody can wear whatever they want, um, but nobody has a gender, if that makes sense. So I guess I'm misrepresenting here. She spoke less about like boys and girls can wear whatever they want, and more that like sometimes boys will wear dresses, but that's not a boy. That's just a child, and they are gender nonconforming, and that's okay. The difference being that when we say that boys can wear dresses, we are actually opening up the sphere of what sex determines. We are opening up gender roles to say that people can present themselves a lot more fluidly. But when we specify and say that a person who is non-conforming is also non-binary or has no identity, then we are actually restricting those definitions to say if you are non-conforming, you have no identity, and that's really harmful, especially to children. I can't emphasize it enough. These are young kids that this was being taught to, and that's harmful even to adults, let alone to children who are just in the prime time of forming their thoughts about the world, and they are just starting to learn how to navigate in the world as the sex that they are. So to impart this belief on them that non-conforming equals non-binary, no identity sort of perspective, is really restrictive on them, because they're going to continue to grow, and as they grow, they're going to think, "Oh, I have to dress the way that boys dress because I have these parts, or else I'm not a boy. I'm non-binary if I don't want to wear this, or if I don't want to play with these toys." Um, and that's dangerous. So that was being taught, and once I came on board, um, a couple of things happened that were really interesting. First off, I tried very hard to communicate with the other teachers. Um, AM teacher and PM teacher. I was the PM teacher. There was crossover a little bit, but communication was supposed to be um, between us. The owner, our manager, she did not facilitate communication between us. It was really on us to make that happen. So I would send emails all the time. I would send out text messages all the time. Hey, what were your plans for this week, so that I can go in accordance with your plans and continue the learning. And I got met with a lot of hostility. And come to find out, this teacher who is non-binary was really um, had some really aggressive feelings about binary people, um, which is like you walk in the same world as I do, hon. You're gonna have to deal with it. Um, and at the time, I was identifying as a trans man, so I was still transgender. I was just identifying as a trans man, which I guess is too binary for some people. Oh no. Um, and so she had a lot of issues with me because of that, and I found out later, expressed to our manager that she thought that I should be let go because I was not open enough to non binary identity, and I wasn't, I guess, as forward thinking as they wanted me. Um, and that's pretty ridiculous. But that's something I wanted to highlight, is that there is some infighting within the trans community about binary trans folks versus non-binary trans folks, and um, to be quite frank, I think it's fucking ridiculous. Um, it's a joke, and I'm sorry. Some people I'm sure are going to be offended and take it really seriously, but I think it's a joke, because it's basically people who are slightly non-conforming saying that people who have done all this radical medicalization and gone through all this process, that they are less committed and less serious, and that's the reverse of it, I think. Um, but whatever. craziness perpetuates itself with more craziness. So that happened, and so I had a really rough time developing any sort of curriculum um, because there would be things that she would go over, and then I would repeat it like a week or two later, not knowing that she had went over it because she wouldn't talk to me. Um, and it got to a point of hostility where she refused to talk to me, even on things that I needed to know, like updates on medication for our children. And we had to go through the manager, um, which was really unnecessary and really immature of her. So that drama aside, I witnessed a couple of things too that were um, really disheartening. One thing that I know is kind of debated in the field of childcare was a reference to pop culture or just cultural events or cultural, I guess, cultural references that are more modern, but things like pop stars or movies or even books. So there were things like we couldn't talk about books. We couldn't talk about, for example, Harry Potter. We couldn't talk about movies. We couldn't talk about superheroes. And like for a frame of reference, for those who don't do childcare or have never had children, little boys, like 4 and 5 year olds, go crazy over superheroes. It's just like it's unavoidable almost. Like they just lose it over superheroes. And I'm not gonna get into like if it's because of the violence or sexist stereotypes or anything like that. But I am just gonna say like they love superheroes, and I personally I enjoy talking with them about some of like the comic history and stuff like that. Like it can be fun. I feel like you're moved by, and it can be fun. But we weren't allowed to talk about any of that. So like one day this kid comes in and he's got a Superman logo on his T-shirt. Some of the kids asked him what his T-shirt said. He mentioned it was from Superman, and because he mentioned that, we pulled him aside. We told him he's not allowed to talk about that, and we made him change his shirt. That's extreme. That is really extreme. That's pretending that the outside world doesn't exist. That's on par with a little cult like facility who is raising children and telling them that only the dear leader is the right one, the one to listen to. None of those politicians or leaders out in the real world should be listened to because our dear leader is the right one. It's on par almost with that kind of behavior of isolating a child's brain to only focus on what they're learning in school, which is this indoctrination. You're not opening them up to the world. And that's part of your job as a teacher is to open their eyes to the things that are out in the world and to talk about it and give it a frame of reference because otherwise they're gonna find out about this stuff eventually and they're not going to have any sort of perspective on it because it's just gonna be confusing for them. So that was one thing that may seem flippant, it may seem insignificant, but honestly, like I felt like that was um, really awful to do to children was to limit, and I understand limiting some of it, like you don't want to like put on Disney movies 24/7 for these kids while they're in school, like that's not educational, it's not good. But the fact is, like when they're at home, they're going to experience these things. Why not merge? Why not merge their home life and their worldly life with school life in a way that is healthy? Um, so that was one thing I learned from that experience was how to navigate bringing parts of um, real life in the outside world into the schoolroom in a way that is healthy and conducive to their learning and their ability to just, like I said, navigate the world. Because that's really important to learn about each. So, yes, I Um, uh, one thing that was really big that I wonder if there are more places, especially around here in Seattle or just the Pacific Northwest. Um, one thing that was part of our structure was pronouns. So all children were they, them. We refer to all children as they, them. Um, and it was absolutely unacceptable to refer to a child as he or she, even if they refer to themselves as that. If the child did refer to themselves as he or she, um, we would firmly um, take them in front of the class, and we would firmly um, tell them that that was incorrect, that they are not a boy or a girl. Um, Sorry, my soul's dying just telling the story. Um, and we would promote that they were that gender wasn't a real thing, but in the notion of there are no boys, there are no girls, there are just people. So I think that's part of what um, was really what stemmed the animosity between me and my other teacher, because um, like I said, she really hated that I identified as a feminine person and noted that to our manager. Um, and so this preschool, this world that they had built was supposed to be this like um, almost, I want to say dystopian, but this sort of genderless society, where there were no boys or girls, no men or women. There were just people, and we weren't supposed to notice different parts. We weren't supposed to notice different ways of dress. We weren't supposed to notice any sort of differences. Um, and that's really repressive because there are differences. Um, and there's a healthy way to point those differences out. Um, so we would reprimand children if a child referred to another child by a he or she pronoun. We would sternly correct them and say they. That's they. No, you understand. That's they, right? That's not he or she. That's they. Um, and it was um, it was a really I don't use this word lightly, but it was a really toxic kind of environment to be in because um, like I said, being identifying as a trans man at the time, um, I was kind of like, so I'm a they them now, even though I worked really hard to not be that. Um, and so even though like I look back on that whole time and I kind of like don't view myself as ever having been a man, obviously I can't be a man. Um, I do view myself as having been a trans man in the past. And at the time, that meant a lot to me. Um, so at the time, that was important to me, was not to an extent of that you see like these days where there's like violence being um, done to people who misgender them. Nothing. I actually was not that extreme. Sometimes I would moan about I'd whine and moan about somebody misgendering me at the grocery store or whatever. But generally speaking, I didn't really care too much. My attitude was more, strangers are going to misgender me because I'm trans and I'm noticeably trans, and that's just the way it is. Um, I am proud of the fact that I had a relatively healthy outlook on the whole misgendering stuff. Um, but I also still was like, okay, in a place where you're saying that you're trans inclusive and you put so much emphasis on this nonsense, um, you're also at the same time shoving me out of the way and telling me that my identity is, not to the par of your identity in a sense. That being non-binary is top and that's best, and I'm just old school and backwards thinking because I'm a trans man. Like it's ridiculous, y'all. It's ridiculous. Um, so yeah, I don't really have a whole lot more to say about it. Just that that was a real life experience that happened. I ended up leaving that place because it was just so poorly run more than anything. At one point, I was working 14-hour days, and they assigned me like 25 children. And that's more than the state regulation is supposed to allow. So, um, aside from that, it's just a heck of a lot of kids to deal with. And they're all, the majority of our children were near to infancy, so that's a lot of work being put in. And it was a little too much for me to handle. Um, and well, too much for me. That's why they have regulations there. So I ended up leaving mostly for those reasons, but I also just really did not like the relationship between my co-teacher and I, or the way that um, things were run in regards to the gender ideology. Um, we we read books about being trans, but we weren't allowed to talk about, other books like Dr. Seuss books and stuff. And it's just it's too much. Yeah, he agrees with me. Um, hey, so it was too much, so I left, and I got a job as a receptionist after. But um, it definitely changed my outlook on how to how to have dialogue with children about gender, and sort of the things not to do. Um, and some of that is that when we impose this idea on children that we're all just genderless blobs walking in the world and there are no differences, they're going to grow up and be really shocked when they start getting treated differently because of the sex they are. And it'd be great to live in a world where differences are only positive, but there are also negative differences. There are things that people will experience because of their sex that are not cool. And children need to be brought up to understand that there are differences, and to, as they get older, be able to learn that those differences may impose oppression or harm on them in their lives. And telling them that none of that's real is negligent. So that's what I learned um, at the preschool, and I'm not going to ever name that preschool. I don't even know if they're still running. To be honest, I would be a little bit surprised because, like I said, they ran things against regulation, and so I imagine they've been called out by now. And for anyone who tells me that I should go and call them out on this and stuff, easier said than done. And I worked there very briefly. I worked there for maybe I think 8 months. Um, so I don't know if it's in my place, and I don't really like being pressured to call out people or places when I'm not in a position to do so. Um, so I'm just trying to get ahead of the curve here. I'm not trying to attack anybody in particular, but like just I get told that so frequently with all these different things, and I'm like, okay, but like I've thought about that. Like it's not something that is new to me, a new concept. I've thought about taking people to court. Thought about holding people accountable and stuff. And in some regards, I have held people accountable. I just don't necessarily talk about it all the time too. So yeah, just putting that out there. So yeah, I guess other than that, not a lot of news that I can share. There have been some updates to Detrans resources. If anyone is being transitioned, you can get in touch with me, message me on here, or comments, um, or you can follow me on Twitter and get in touch with me that way. There are some new resources for detransitioners that are available, and I would love to share those. Some of those resources are looking to remain more private because of harassment. And so we don't want to share that information to the public. So if you are someone who is in need of resources, please don't hesitate to contact me. Um, or if you want to get in touch with other transitioners too, even though I'm a teeny tiny itty bitty channel, I actually have connection with a ton of detransitioners, so I can put you in touch with people from all over the world, and I'd love to do that. So yeah, I've been making some leeway with cult information. I had a Zoom session with a great cult expert who I will not name here because I'm not sure that this particular individual wants to be affiliated with my channel yet, but we are in conversation, and it it kind of came around from me going into it being like, hey, I'm interested in the overlap of religious cults and the transgender community as a cult, or being seen through the lens of a cult, and looking at the overlap there. Went from me in that perspective to now, oh shit, I was raised in a cult and I need to address a lot of personal stuff because of that. So kind of backpedaled a bit and now I'm sort of dealing with my own personal history a bit more than I anticipated, but that's good and it's healthy and it's stuff that I need to do. But so I'm hoping to get back on the train of looking at it from a broader scope, because I think that's a really cool thing. Not cool, but it's really interesting to observe the differences and similarities between what's going on in the trans community now. And when I refer to them, I mean generally the trans community. Obviously, there's exceptions. But what's going on with them and what has gone on previously with other cults, and if we look at cults as spiritual or enlightenment or business related, or we look at them as very traditional religious, those things are all their own entities, and then we've got the trans community, and I believe that is its own entity as well. And so looking at similarities and also looking at the differences, looking at how the trans community is taking new approaches to communication with its members, as well as manipulation tactics. I'm really sorry about. But anyway, so that's all the stuff that I'm looking into. I'm gonna cut this short because I gotta put a little doggy in timeout. I think because he knows better. But yeah, please stay in touch with me. My Twitter handle will be below. Let me know what other stuff you'd like me to talk about. And like I said, like I have been taking a bit of a mental health break, but I'm ready to like kind of get back into it a little bit more. So I'm gonna start like trying to think of different things maybe that I haven't talked about yet, or things that other people are talking about that I just haven't chimed in about. I don't know if my opinion would be valuable on those things or not, but I've got opinions, so why not use these platforms, right? Anyway, yeah, hope you guys like the new hair. Is interesting. It was really bright pink, and then I washed it, and then this happened. So I'm a redhead now because that's my genetics. And I'm not hating it at all. So, it might change again, but I like it for now. So, yeah. Hope you're all well. Please, do me a favor and wash your damn hands. Wear your fucking mask. Stay safe. Stay healthy. Stay in touch.